AITA for asking my SIL to pay her share of the bill when I used a gift card to cover most of the meal. She wanted me to cover her and her boyfriend's bills with my card. I 26 male have been with my partner 27 female for a few years now, and for the most part, I get along well with her family. Her father, in particular, has always been kind to me, so when his birthday was coming up, my partner and I decided to take him out to a nice dinner. He enjoys a good steak, and there is a well-known steakhouse in town that we thought would be the perfect place to celebrate. A while back, I had received a thoughtful gift from a contractor I work closely with. Along with the gift, there was a $200 gift card to the same steakhouse we were planning to go to. I held on to it, thinking it would be perfect for a special occasion. When my partner and I decided on this restaurant for her father's birthday, I knew this was the right moment to use it. The only issue was that my sister-in-law 31 female had been there when I first received the gift. It was during Christmas, and as I unwrapped the box, the gift card was inside. She saw me holding it up, and before I could even process it, she made a comment about how we should use it for their dad's birthday. At the time, I thought nothing of it and agreed because, in my mind, we meant my partner, myself, and her parents. I did not think I was signing away full control of how the gift card would be used or that it was an invitation for my sister-in-law to take liberties with it. Fast forward to the week leading up to the dinner, and my sister-in-law asked if her boyfriend could come along. Now, this was not just any boyfriend. This was a guy she had been with for a while, but their relationship was notoriously rocky. They had broken up for nearly a year, and only recently had they decided to give things another shot. The family had mixed feelings about him. Some were indifferent, but others, including my partner, had not been thrilled about their reunion. My partner is a very non-confrontational person, and despite her reservations, she went along with it when her sister asked. I, on the other hand, was hesitant, but since my partner gave the green light, I decided not to push back too hard. The night of the dinner arrived. We all met at the steakhouse, and from the moment we sat down, the vibe was a bit off. My sister-in-law and her boyfriend acted as though they were on their own private date, barely engaging with the rest of the table. When it came time to order, things took a turn. While most of us chose reasonably priced meals, steaks, sides, and drinks that were within a moderate range, my sister-in-law and her boyfriend went all out. They both ordered the most expensive item on the menu, surf and turf, which included a high-quality cut of steak and lobster. Not only that, but they each added an extra lobster tail to their meals. I noticed this immediately but decided not to say anything at the moment. As the meal progressed, the atmosphere remained somewhat strained. My father-in-law seemed happy enough, but I could not shake the feeling that my sister-in-law was treating this dinner as an all-expenses-paid treat, despite the fact that I never once implied I would be covering everything. When the main courses were finished, she made another suggestion: dessert. Now, my partner and I had already planned ahead and had bought a cake for her father. We wanted to bring it back to their house after dinner so he could enjoy it at home. When I reminded my sister-in-law of this, she seemed slightly annoyed but dropped the topic. Then the bill came. When the waiter set it down on the table, I opened it and saw the total, just over $300, after tax and tip. I was not entirely surprised, given what my sister-in-law and her boyfriend had ordered, but it still felt excessive. I took out the $200 gift card and used it, leaving $100 still owed. At this point, I turned to my sister-in-law and told her she needed to cover her and her boyfriend's portion, as well as split the cost of our father-in-law's meal with me. I explained that the gift card was not some bottomless pit of money and that her and her boyfriend's extravagant choices were the reason we exceeded its value. She did not take this well. She immediately got defensive, saying that the gift card should have covered everything. She accused me of being stingy and making things difficult when I had already agreed to use the gift card for the dinner. I told her that agreeing to use it did not mean she and her boyfriend could order whatever they wanted without any responsibility. Her boyfriend stayed quiet, likely sensing the tension, but she was furious. She refused to pay, grabbed her coat, and stormed out, dragging her boyfriend with her. The rest of us sat there in awkward silence. I paid the remaining $100 on my credit card, still feeling justified in my stance but now dealing with the aftermath of my sister-in-law's tantrum. My father-in-law thanked me for dinner, but the tension was thick in the air. My partner and I drove her parents home, and the car ride was uncomfortably quiet. When we dropped them off, they gave polite but short goodbyes. On the way back, my partner finally spoke up. She told me that I had been out of line and that I should have just let it go instead of making a big deal about it. I told her I disagreed. Her sister had clearly taken advantage of the situation and had no problem letting me foot the bill for her expensive choices. My partner sighed but did not argue further. I could tell she just wanted the whole thing to be over with. Now, I cannot shake the feeling that maybe I should have handled it differently. But at the same time, I cannot help but feel that I was in the right. I agreed to use the gift card, but that did not mean it was open season for my sister-in-law and her boyfriend to treat the dinner like their own personal luxury experience. Am I the asshole? Update 1. This afternoon, my phone buzzed with a call from my father-in-law, Mike. I hesitated for a moment before answering, unsure of what to expect. After last night's disaster of a dinner, I assumed there would still be some lingering tension, but to my surprise, his tone was warm. He thanked me for organizing and paying for the dinner, told me he really enjoyed it, and said that he appreciated my concern. I could hear the sincerity in his voice, and for a brief moment, I felt a small wave of relief. At least someone appreciated the effort I had put in. Then, as the conversation continued, he casually mentioned that he planned to call his daughter, Emily, to talk about last night. He didn't elaborate on what he was going to say, but the way he phrased it and the weight in his voice made it clear that this was not going to be just a friendly chat. He wasn't happy with how things had unfolded, and judging by his tone, he wanted to make sure Emily knew it. I didn't ask questions, nor did I try to involve myself. As far as I was concerned, this was no longer my issue. Whatever Mike wanted to say to his daughter was between them. I had already spent too much energy on this situation, and I was ready to move on. Still, the whole thing gnawed at me. I knew how stubborn Emily could be, and I wasn't expecting any kind of apology from her, but the tension from the previous night lingered in my mind. To defuse the situation, or at least show that I wasn't holding on to resentment, I decided to send her a message. I kept it short and straightforward, letting her know that I hadn't meant for things to become so tense. I told her that I could have explained the situation about the payment better, and that it wasn't my intention to make her feel uncomfortable. I didn't grovel, and I certainly didn't take full responsibility for what happened, but I tried to smooth things over. I stared at the message for a few seconds before hitting send. Then I waited. And waited. Hours passed, and there was no response. No acknowledgement, no read receipt, nothing. I wasn't exactly surprised, but I won't lie, it still irritated me. Not even a simple, got it, or a half-hearted, let's just move on, message. It was radio silence. Meanwhile, Sarah had been acting off all day. She wasn't outright ignoring me, but the warmth that was usually there was noticeably absent. Our conversations were minimal, and whenever we did talk, she kept it short and to the point. She wasn't giving me the silent treatment, but it was clear that she wasn't happy with me. And the worst part? She never actually said what was bothering her. She didn't bring up the dinner, didn't mention Emily, and didn't say anything about what Mike had told me. It was just this unspoken coldness that settled between us, and honestly, it was starting to wear on me. I didn't understand it. Did she really think I was in the wrong here? Was she upset that I asked Emily to pay her share, or was she just annoyed that there was conflict at all? Knowing Sarah, it was probably the latter. She hated conflict. She always had. She preferred to let things slide rather than stir the pot, even when someone else was clearly in the wrong. I had seen it before, but this time, it was different. This time, I was the one left out in the cold while her sister, the one who had taken advantage of the situation, got a free pass. The whole thing left a bad taste in my mouth. I didn't regret asking Emily to pay for what she and her boyfriend had ordered. I didn't regret calling out the fact that she had gone overboard and assumed I would cover it. But I did regret the way it had blown up. I regretted that now, instead of being appreciated for treating Mike to a nice dinner, I was the bad guy for daring to set a boundary. By the time the evening rolled around, I had given up hope of hearing back from Emily. That ship had sailed. Whether she was embarrassed, angry, or just being stubborn, I had no idea. And honestly, I wasn't going to waste more energy trying to figure it out. If she wanted to ignore me, that was her choice. But the bigger issue, the one I actually cared about, was Sarah. I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over between us. The coldness, the silence, the way she hadn't even acknowledged the situation, it all felt like a quiet storm waiting to break. I didn't know how this would play out. Maybe Sarah and I would talk about it later, maybe we wouldn't. Maybe Emily would eventually respond, or maybe she'd just pretend none of this ever happened. At this point, I wasn't expecting much. But one thing was certain, I had learned my lesson. Next time, if there ever was a next time, I would handle things very differently. Honestly, I don't expect to get my money back from Emily, this is more of a lesson for me on how to handle similar situations in the future. Update 2. A few days later, Sarah mentioned that her family was planning another dinner. This time, it was at a different restaurant, one that was much more relaxed, a casual yet slightly upscale spot known for its seafood and pasta. It wasn't a celebration, just a regular family dinner, and despite everything that had happened at the steakhouse, I agreed to go. I didn't want to let that incident linger in the air, and part of me hoped that by showing up, things could return to normal. I wasn't looking for an apology from Emily at this point. I knew I wasn't going to get one. What I wanted was just a simple, drama-free evening. A meal without tension, without conflict, without feeling like I was being taken advantage of. I told myself that the last dinner had been an isolated situation, a misunderstanding that had spiraled, and that it wouldn't happen again. When we arrived, it felt like a chance to reset. The atmosphere was warm, the restaurant was bustling but not overly crowded, and for the first few minutes, everything felt normal. Mike was in good spirits, making small talk about work and the latest news. Sarah was chatting with her mother. The tension from a few nights ago seemed like a distant memory. And then, just as I was starting to relax, Emily walked in, with the same boyfriend in tow. I felt my stomach tighten the second I saw them. I hadn't been told they were coming, and judging by Sarah's lack of reaction, she had known and simply hadn't mentioned it to me. I forced myself to stay neutral, nodding in acknowledgement as they sat down. If I let my annoyance show now, I'd be the problem. I'd be the one making things uncomfortable. So I kept my expression blank and focused on my menu, determined to just get through the evening. But history has a way of repeating itself. From the moment the waiter arrived, Emily and her boyfriend acted like they were at some five-star dining experience. While the rest of us picked reasonable dishes, pasta, seafood, and a few shared appetizers, Emily went all in. Not only did she order the most expensive entree on the menu, but she also got an additional starter, a side, and a dessert before we had even finished our main courses. And then came the wine. A bottle of high-end wine that no one else at the table had asked for or even seemed interested in. She barely glanced at anyone else before ordering it, as if it was a given that we would all be fine with it. Her boyfriend nodded along, adding little comments about how you have to treat yourself and how a good meal is worth the price. I knew exactly how this night was going to end. As the food arrived, Emily and her boyfriend acted as though they were the only people at the table. They clinked glasses, took photos of their meals, and barely engaged with anyone else unless it was to make a comment about how incredible their food was. Mike, as usual, was polite but distant, while Sarah and her mother kept the conversation light. I was waiting, watching, knowing that the moment of reckoning would come when the bill hit the table. And then it did. When the check arrived, I already knew before even looking that it was going to be worse than last time. I glanced at the total, and sure enough, it was well over what we had paid at the steakhouse. The wine alone had been absurdly expensive, and considering Emily and her boyfriend had been the only ones drinking it, there was no doubt in my mind about who was responsible for inflating the bill. I turned to Emily and, without any hesitation, asked if she was going to pay her share. She let out an exaggerated sigh, as if I was asking the most unreasonable thing in the world. Then, with an innocent shrug, she casually stated that she had forgotten her wallet. She even made a small, apologetic face, as if this was some unfortunate accident rather than the completely predictable, intentional move that it was. I felt something inside me snap. I looked at Sarah, hoping, praying, for any kind of support. But she didn't meet my eyes. She simply stared down at the table, her hands resting in her lap, as if by not acknowledging the situation, she could pretend it wasn't happening. That was when it hit me. This wasn't just about Emily. This was about Sarah too. This was about the fact that she had let this happen again, that she had known Emily and her boyfriend were coming and hadn't said a word, that she had watched them order as if they were royalty and still said nothing. I could have argued. I could have called Emily out, pushed back, forced her to at least acknowledge what she was doing. But what was the point? I already knew how this would go. Emily would act like I was overreacting. Sarah would stay silent. The dinner would turn into another awkward, uncomfortable mess. So instead, I did the only thing I could do. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my card, and paid the bill. And as I watched the receipt print and felt the weight of yet another absurdly expensive meal land on my shoulders, I knew one thing for certain. I was done. This wasn't just about money. It wasn't even about Emily. It was about respect. It was about the fact that I had let myself become the easy target, the reliable one, the person everyone assumed would just handle it. And I realized that I no longer want to be the one who is constantly used in these games. Update 3. This is probably the last update because the problem seems to have finally been resolved. After the disaster at the second dinner, I had resigned myself to the idea that things would never change. I had spent days replaying the situation in my head, dissecting every moment, every word, every decision I had made. I kept wondering if I had handled things the wrong way, if I should have spoken up more aggressively or refused to pay altogether. Maybe I should have called Emily out in front of everyone instead of quietly picking up the check. Maybe I should have refused to go to the second dinner in the first place, knowing full well what kind of situation I was walking into. But no matter how I spun it, I always arrived at the same conclusion: I was tired. Tired of feeling like the outsider in my own relationship, tired of being the one forced to take on the financial burden while everyone else conveniently looked the other way, tired of the unspoken expectation that I would just deal with it. I had reached my breaking point, and I wasn't going to let this continue. Then, out of the blue, Emily called. I stared at my phone for a long moment before answering. She had been ignoring my messages before, acting as if none of this had happened, so I wasn't sure what to expect. Was this going to be another argument? A half-hearted attempt at justifying herself? Some backhanded remark about how I had overreacted again? But the second I picked up, I knew something was different. Her tone lacked its usual arrogance, that dismissive attitude she always had when money was involved. There was no smugness, no casual entitlement. Instead, she sounded hesitant, almost nervous, like she wasn't entirely comfortable making this call. And then, without any theatrics, she apologized. She said she had spoken to their father, that he had made her realize how out of line she had been, that she had overstepped her bounds. There was no attempt to twist the narrative, no effort to make it seem like I was in the wrong. She didn't downplay what she had done or try to make excuses about how it had all been a misunderstanding. She simply acknowledged, in plain words, that she had messed up. And then, to my complete shock, she Venmo'd me $100. It wasn't everything she owed, not by a long shot. But at this point, I wasn't going to push it. It was better than nothing, and more importantly, it was a sign that she was at least taking some level of accountability. She didn't have to send me anything, she could have just let the situation fade away, pretending it had never happened. But she didn't. And while I wasn't suddenly going to trust her again or assume that everything was magically fixed, I also wasn't going to drag this out any longer than it needed to be. Holding on to resentment wasn't going to do me any good. I accepted her apology and thanked her, not because I believed she had completely changed, but because at the end of the day, letting go of this tension was the better choice for my own peace of mind. Later that evening, Sarah and I finally had the conversation we had been avoiding for far too long. This wasn't just about the dinners, or the money, or even about Emily herself. This was about the way I had been made to feel in these situations, like I was completely alone, like I was the only one who saw what was happening, like I was the only one willing to call it out. I had taken on the role of being the responsible one, the reliable one, the person who would just quietly handle things while everyone else avoided the discomfort. And I was done with that. I told Sarah that I wasn't just frustrated with Emily, I was frustrated with her too. Because every time Emily pulled these stunts, every time she pushed the boundaries of what was acceptable, Sarah stayed silent. Every time I stood up for myself, Sarah made me feel like I was the bad guy. And I was sick of it. I made it clear that I didn't want this to happen again. That I needed to know she had my back, that I needed to feel like we were on the same team instead of feeling like I was always standing alone. That I didn't want to constantly be the one left looking like the villain just because I refused to let myself be taken advantage of. To my relief, she listened. really listened. She didn't try to argue, didn't try to downplay what I was saying, didn't deflect by making excuses for her sister. She admitted that she should have spoken up, that she had let her conflict-avoidant nature take over instead of supporting me when I needed it. She told me she understood why I was frustrated and that she would make sure it didn't happen again. And for the first time since all of this started, I actually believed her. I saw a lot of comments from people calling me spineless, saying that I should have put my foot down sooner or walked away from the situation entirely. And honestly, they weren't entirely wrong. I held back because this family dynamic is still new to me. I didn't want to make a bad impression on my in-laws, didn't want to be the one who disrupted the fragile balance of their interactions. I thought that by keeping the peace, I was making things easier for everyone, but all it did was enable the same cycle to repeat itself. The more I let things slide, the worse it got. And I've learned my lesson. On the financial side, I should clarify something. Sarah and I have a joint credit card that we use for eating out. Whenever we go out as a group, Emily usually reimburses me for her portion plus 50% of the cost of our in-laws. That's why I had asked her to at least partially cover the cost of their father's birthday dinner. It wasn't an unreasonable request, just the way things had always worked between us. The problem was that she decided to take advantage of the situation, assuming that because a gift card was involved, it was free rein for her to order whatever she wanted. That's where everything fell apart. She treated the situation as though it was a free meal for her and her boyfriend, rather than acknowledging that it was a family dinner with shared responsibility. But now, finally, it seems like things are settling. Emily's apology was a step in the right direction. Sarah and I have a better understanding of each other, and I have learned how important it is to speak up when something doesn't sit right with me. I don't expect this to be a magical, permanent fix for everything, but at the very least, I know where I stand now. And I know that I won't let myself be put in this position again.